like the technology is just amazing. And now we're blasting all over the country.
We really, yeah, we got someone from London.
I'm mobile. I brought one of my Bibles to
Big guy.
No, not that far.
Okay, I'm mobile. So we have to stand closer.
Well, it's going to be on the 25 as a low. Next week is so it's going to be cool. I didn't know that.
So, our girls are trying to want to investigate potential location. Yeah.
And you come up to your neighborhood?
Yeah, really nice big one. Colleagues. Apartment.
Are they walking and all that stuff? Running, jumping, way beyond walking.
Good to see you. Yeah. A week ago, I sort of emailed how was the program?
There was one too, and there was really bad.
I've already told.
Just
for us to see each other.
I know,
At
right?
the same time.
You have those twins?
I think, yeah.
That's ridiculous. You should just have coffee or breakfast.
I know.
You have twins? You bring the girls?
Okay, but I hope we
Oh,
don't
yeah.
break the board now.
I wouldn't do that to anybody.
No.
But they go to daycare twice a week. I live by my two sons too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Actually, it's a beautiful
No, it is accessible.
It's, yeah, you know, it's like the roads are all like 45 and 55, so it doesn't take as long as it used to. Like, oh, I'm like, yeah, it's 55 on Aho, yeah, 45 on Kinney, and then, so I make it very like 25 minutes, 20 minutes, so I'm talking.
I know. Is it already back?
Yeah.
I just died. Yeah, that's right. I definitely like it.
As well as you can do with toddlers. Yeah, they get about 37 they wake up around 7. Right, so we did sleep training. Best thing ever. It was like, it's one of those investments. No, it's or you just have well, I read all these, I read tons of like walks, swings, and triple. They train on like, and then it usually gets interrupted when the team come in and they go to bed at 7:30 and watch
That's great.
I feel like I'm 21 months. We're getting ready to leave for I don't mind it. This one's out of in January. Oh, wow. January. So, it's better maybe before I leave.
That'd be fun.
Okay.
Okay, I'll remind you. I love that picture.
Isn't it awesome? Oh yeah, she called me.
We're going to start just about 2 minutes, so be prepared. It's your 2-minute warning.
Currently, there's a short issue. My mother sent me a link. Like every other second, yeah, profession. I love looking at this.
Let me see if I have the,
What is it? Oh, series? Oh, the back. I bet there's a lot of yeah, a lot of this is great. First time we posted.
Like he's sitting here.
It's like
Look at y'all quieting down. Just like you're supposed to. You're so well behaved. It's so nice to have you so well behaved. Thank you. Just letting our panelists say some hellos and then we'll get started there. No, say your hellos. Alex, will you pass that other water down to Raúl? Perfect. And I'll fill them up for you as you go if you need more water. Thank you all so much for being here. First things first, we have ASL interpretation, as you can see. Is there anyone who needs ASL interpretation? No? We also have Spanish language interpretation here. En español. Does anyone need that? Y'all might be off the hook, but it was really important for us to have both Spanish language and ASL interpretation to make this an accessible space. The other thing I want to mention, of course, there are binary gender restrooms, boys and girls, just to the left. However, if you don't identify as one of those two categories, there is a gender-neutral bathroom on the 3rd floor, so 1 floor down, also over there on the bookstore side. And we recognize that there should be one on every floor. There's not. But at least there's one in the building, which I guess is better than some universities. That's all I can say about that. So, my name is Carmen Chavez, and I teach at the University of Wisconsin. I am very, very happy to be here for the Queer Migration Symposium. I lived in Arizona for 5 years, and so but Phoenix, and I know there's the Tucson Phoenix thing. But I'm very happy to be here. One other quick announcement, or a couple of other quick announcements I wanted to make. So we are live streaming these events. So to the left is the live stream camera there. And so people, if you have friends who wish they could be here but they can't, they can watch this online by going to queermigration.com. Also, if you'd like to live tweet, we would encourage, if you've got your smartphone or your computer, please tweet along with the presentations. You can do that by using the hashtag #QueerMigrations, which is conveniently the name of the symposium. So also to the right here we have more cameras there, looking much more official than over here on the left. And these are two filmmakers, HLT Kwan and Crystal Griffith. And they've made some fantastic political documentaries, including work about gentrification in Puerto Rico. They did a documentary in 2009 called Mountains That Take Wing, which was a 13-year dialogue between Angela Davis and Yuri Kochiyama. An amazing film, They're currently doing a film about queers and economic justice, economic issues more broadly, and they would love to interview you about your experience with these things. And so they're going to be recording this, but after, if you're interested in being an interview subject for their next documentary on queers and economics, you can meet with them, and we're going to have a space just out here to the left, and you can do a quick interview with them. We'll also have space tomorrow if you're attending the conference tomorrow. 460 Modern Languages is the room tomorrow. 460 Modern Languages. So tonight you're tired when we get done, you don't want to do it, that's great, but you can do it over here. But tomorrow, 460 Modern Languages. I'm personally endorsing them because these are my people. They're mentors to me, beloveds, family. So please, if you're willing to talk to them about questions of economics, that would be fantastic. What is the other thing I was going to say? So if you're just joining us tonight, this is a part of a bigger symposium. We were all day today, and we're going to be most of the day tomorrow in the Kiva room, which is downstairs on the 2nd floor. So please do join us for the last day of the symposium. We've been having some pretty fantastic conversations, which has really been a lot of fun and really, really productive. So I do hope that you'll consider joining us more broadly. And a lot of good people helping us out here. Am I forgetting anything?
Programs for tomorrow are in the back as well. And there's other good literature that people should pick up.
And there are other materials on the back there. So there are a couple of zines, which Alex will talk about for some of his work. Offering a donation for the hard work that's gone into that. There are also some other materials for you to take a look at back there. There's also some jewelry for sale, as I understand. Is that right? Our friend in the back there. And so feel free. It's probably I don't know if that's
Free?
legal or not, but we're doing it because that's what we do. So definitely support local artists and creative folks here. That's what we're all about. So I think that's all the announcements we have. So I want to introduce our speakers. I have to say, I'm so excited about this panel. This a panel of local Arizona-based activists, workers, folks who I have to say I have the utmost respect for each person on this panel doing work that is so valuable. I'll briefly introduce them to you. They're each going to have a few minutes to share some of the things that they've been doing related to the border, related to Arizona, queer issues, related to migration issues, some combination of all 3 or 4, whatever that was. I think you're going to really benefit from hearing from them. So let me give brief introductions here to each of them. So our first panelist here is Raúl Alcaraz Ochoa, born in Jalisco, Mexico. He's a community and day labor organizer right here in Tucson. Also works with the Rainbow Defense Fund, Mariposas Sin Fronteras, and the Southside Workers Center. The Rainbow Defense Fund, if you were here this morning, you heard a bit about it, seeks to raise funds for the bond release of refugee and migrant prisoners at immigration detention centers in Florence and Eloy in Arizona. And so very excited to have Raúl. Next to Raúl, we have Alex Soto, who is a member of the Tohono Nation. He's also an activist living in what we now call Phoenix. He is a border resistor. He's a member of the incredible hip-hop group Shining Soul, and he's been working extensively on challenging the extension of the 202 freeway in Phoenix, which some of you know if you've been there, which is the subject of some of those zines back there that I'm hoping you'll donate and pick up, and has been featured on programs like Democracy Now!, so we're really lucky to have Alex here. Next to Alex, we have Kathryn Rodriguez, my longtime friend. She is a Tejana and a Chicana, nearly 15 years of experience working in social justice movements, a variety of them. She's got a bachelor's degree from California State, Sacramento. She's got a master's in public administration from right here at University of Arizona. She's worked with farm worker struggles in Immokalee, Florida. Many of us know about those workers, as well as in Woodburn, Oregon. She's pretty much centered on issues faced by the immigrant and migrant communities here, specifically related to deaths on the border, which we're going to hear about tonight. She currently works as an intake specialist at the Colibrí Center for Human Rights, and also an administrative assistant with the Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras, and formerly with the Coalición de Derechos Humanos, which some of you maybe know her from. And last but not least, all the way from Phoenix, Arizona, we have Vikter Medina. Vikter is an organizer with Third Space, also with the Association of Jotería Arts, which you're having a conference in February, is that correct?
Next year, yeah.
Next year?
Yeah, about 2016.
2016, so.
Yeah, it's pushed back.
That's so good, but focusing, on the sort of this intersection, particularly, people of color who are also queer, doing really fantastic work in Phoenix. What a great panel! This is a treat. I hope you're all as excited as I am. So, can we start with you, Raúl? Since you're a man. No, apparently not. So, can you give it up for all of them?
Buenas noches. Sorry I didn't come a little more colorful or gay. I feel very butch tonight. It's not a bad thing. Well, I'm gonna start off. Borders, walls, fences cause the world to deny our existence. Borders, walls, fences condemn us to centuries of living in shadows of shame and inferiority. Borders, walls, fences criminalize undocumented people, queer, bronze bodies. Borders, walls, fences militarize our soul, absorbing bullets, shock grenades, homophobic debris, dividing, conquering minds, bodies, spirits. Borders, walls, fences trample our dignity, human rights, condemning freedom to a slow death along U.S.-Mexico murder lands. Borders, walls, fences rape, detain, imprison, deport, shoot, kill, disempower. Borders, walls, fences widen gaps between rich and poor, between whites, non-whites. Borders, walls, fences commit anonymous, blood-spilled genocides, lynching brown, dangling bodies in San Isidro, Yuma, Nogales, El Paso, Brownsville, Laredo. Borders, walls, fences justify fire burning our flesh. Borders, walls, fences breed resistance of our multiple spirits, always in exile, always illuminating. Borders, walls, fences are not natural. We defy and subvert them so they crumble to the dust of history's pages. Borders, walls, fences shattered to a million broken pieces no longer are reality. Borders, walls, fences, a world without them, beyond cages and barbed wire, a world where butterflies and hummingbirds fly, fly, fly. This was called The Brown Joto Revolution Requires Bloodshed. Todo peaceful. Somos brown Joto bodies cruzando cada día de nuestras vidas. We face political, spiritual, physical borders marked en las heridas profundas de nuestras espaldas mojadas. Cruzamos, atravesamos mundos enteros. Nuestra vida es una revelación, una lucha, una rebeldía. Es un grito más ruidoso que la declaración por una independencia mexicana que aún no conocemos. Nuestros espíritus múltiples enfrentan fronteras coloniales. Mis raíces indígenas invadidas, mi lengua detenida, mi lado mexicano chicano arrestado. As a male, I've been castrated, raped, my bones shattered, mi corazón espinado, my spirit tortured, my humanity degraded. Mi lado Joto was deported multiple times, displaced, living in exile. I am shadow among millions of shadows. But we are one body, una tierra, one people. Nuestros espíritus múltiples no se dejan ahogar. Like runaway slaves on the eve of rebellion, we break our chains y nos desatamos de más de 700 millas de muros fronterizos, reclaiming what is rightfully ours. Today we declare the Brown Joto Revolution requires bloodshed. That was a remix from Malcolm X. The Negro Revolution requires bloodshed. So that was inspiration from Malcolm X, but I queer-eyed it. I believe the struggle for a world in which LGBTQ people can live without fear or persecution or incarceration is flourishing. I fight for a world where no rainbows and butterflies are caged in detention or prison. I feel like Miss Universe right now. I am a queer man, born in Jalisco, Mexico, and raised in San Francisco Bay Area. I was first exposed to the effects of incarceration, where my family and community was impacted by detention and deportation. My family permanently came to the United States when I was 6. My mother and I were undocumented in California during the era of Prop 187, and my mother was terrified that a teacher, social worker, or doctor could call immigration if they suspected I was undocumented. At that age, I could not understand the larger political context of criminalization and xenophobia that she was responding to. A few years later, my father, who became a naturalized citizen, petitioned for my mother and I and became U.S. permanent residents. Currently, the national conversation on comprehensive immigration reform remains stalled. Meanwhile, migrants are detained and deported in record numbers each year. Due to congressional mandate, the Department of Homeland Security detains, as we currently sit here right now, there are 34,000 migrants detained on any given day in a patchwork detention system that includes 250 DHS detention centers, county jails, and for-profit prisons. Many are detained with no possibility of release due to excessively punitive mandatory detention provisions enacted in '96. A significant and growing number of the people detained by immigration are LGBTQ. Many are asylum seekers being persecuted based on gender identity and sexual orientation. When they are caught up in the immigration enforcement system, they find themselves in a system that systematically fails to protect them. LGBTQ asylum seekers, who are mostly survivors with a history of persecution and trauma, face abusive conditions in detention that include sexual assault, solitary confinement, harassment, inadequate medical and mental health services, lack of access to legal representation, and ineffective appeal and complaint processes. Furthermore, I have encountered horrifying stories of queer and trans people in detention. Months ago, Marichui Leal Camino wrote to Mariposas Sin Fronteras. She had been raped while detained in a for-profit detention center in Eloy, Arizona. Marichui, a 23-year-old transgender woman originally from Mexico, has been in detention for a year in an all-male facility. According to a November 2013 report from the Center for American Progress, LGBTQ detainees are 15 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than heterosexual and non-transgender detainees. Transgender and queer migrants confront structural oppression on multiple fronts: gender, sexual orientation, race, class, national origin, language. As a result, racial profiling, the criminalization of migration, and the prison industrial complex disproportionately impact LGBTQ migrants. As the vast majority of detainees go without legal representation, satisfying the requirements to win an immigration case is very difficult, especially if they are left without the support of an anti-detention organizing network. Another woman who wrote to Mariposas Sin Fronteras, Jasmine, a transgender woman from Honduras, wrote to me about her experiences in detention. One time, I was ordered to strip off my clothes in front of all men. They, the guards, didn't care that I had undergone hormone treatment and had breasts. They violated my body. In another instance, Jasmine's HIV status was recklessly disclosed by guards in front of a large group of detainees. Jasmine told me she wanted to crawl under a rock and oftentimes contemplated suicide. This is not what she expected when she crossed the scorching Arizona desert, leaving behind family abuse, social discrimination, HIV stigma, and persecution based on gender identity and sexual orientation in Honduras for what she imagined would be a better life in the United States. 2 years later, the letters and the calls have not stopped. As a result, we founded Mariposas Sin Fronteras to support people like Jasmine and Marichui get out of detention. Our work is a constant battle of raising funds to pay bonds to get LGBTQ people released from detention. Working with other groups like the Florence Immigration and Refugee Project to help support their asylum claims, and the Arcoiris Liberation Team in Phoenix to do public advocacy campaigns to apply pressure on ICE to release our friends and change the abusive conditions. We also provide emotional support. We do letter writing sessions so that we send messages of solidarity to people that write to us that are in detention. We do letters of support to the judge. Provide an address sponsor, because an address sponsor is necessary for them to be released on bond or on their own recognizance. We do visitations 1 to 3 times per month. We attend court hearings when possible to accompany people in their process. We do fundraising for bond releases through private donations, through benefit dinners, and also online fundraising campaigns. We do also post detention support, so hospitality after they are released. We find people housing or connect them into the cities that they are intending to go. We also connect folks with resources such as employment, mental health services, clinics, food banks, clothing, and stuff that's necessary once they are released. But we participate in public advocacy campaigns when necessary, so doing online petitions, rallies, and letters as they are necessary for people's cases. Overall, Mariposas Sin Fronteras thus far has been able to fundraise almost $40,000 in bonds in the past 2 years to assist in the bond release of 11 trans, gay, lesbian, bisexual asylum seekers. Additionally, we have assisted in the release of 10 LGBTQ folks through other ways, such as address support and letters of recommendation. Although we recognize that these are our victories and accomplishments, we also understand that individual freedom doesn't necessarily or automatically translate to systemic change or collective liberation. That's why it is important for us to, one, be rooted in a prison abolition vision and framework to position bond releases as victories along the way, for example, as steps towards a vision of fighting for a world free of detention centers, prisons, and borders. And two, continue lifting the voices and building the leadership of people directly impacted and formerly detained LGBTQ individuals as necessary precursors to meaningful and transformative change. To conclude, I keep getting goosebumps. My hairs rise like ancient desert saguaro thorns. I feel the knot clogging my throat, tears blinding my vision, my skin reddening to the burning of flesh, my heartbeat pounding and pounding and pounding. How much can I take before freedom is the only thing worth living for? Siento las espinas por dentro. Es una sensación que llega desde las entrañas de mis sueños indocumentados and queer visions of liberation, none reflected in U.S. Senate policies. Rage streams infinitely as I watch political betrayals and coercion play out on C-SPAN, CNN news channels. Dreams of equality hijacked, detained by colonial nightmares fueling American empire, I drown in insurgency, swimming far away into rainbow horizons where I escape to queer Mexican dreams of freedom and Palestinian rebellions and intifadas. As men, as women, as queer gender-defiant warriors, we uprise to break our chains and free political prisoners. This is the liberation of a dream detained. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raúl. And next we have Alex Soto.
Check. Skakurinik, Ani Chakshugi, Alex Soto, Gamshik, Owastik, Tohono, Object, Tohono Nation. My name is Alex Soto. I'm originally from the community of Cells, which is about 40 miles west of here on the Tohono Nation. Other than that, this is where I'm from. Up in the city, y'all know the deal. But back on my reservation, peep the ordeal. Red light, blue light, keep still. Checking for ID, you get the ideal. Who your family be? Where your papers at? Don't it sound like a chop and screw track? Feds on my back taking photos. Border patrol equals Gestapo, they have to get you. I'm just minding my biz. Officer tripping like Orlando be his. Pop quiz, how did we let it get this far? Spy drones got me on radar. Star Trek lights at night, minus Picard, all up in my backyard. Fuck the National Guard and the Frontera. Yo, we under attack. Time to do it like Pierre Machu and fight back. It's like that. Click clap. Where your papers at? We under attack. Fight back. It's war. Click clap. Where your papers at? We under attack. Fight back. It's war. Just to share, I guess this is the brief introduction. However, myself as a Tohono who lives now in so-called Phoenix and so-called Arizona, it's very challenging to be in these struggles, these conversations around what does justice look like in terms of border militarization and what's happening with the state. And as an Autumn, we know firsthand what colonialism is because our land has been, at this point, occupied. So as now a 28-year-old Tohono Autumn living in this so-called modern world, it's very disheartening at times to see, where things are at in terms of our people. But at the same time, it's also very empowering and the inspiration from our communities to know that we're still here. So a lot of the work that I guess quote unquote works, I hate using that term, comes around addressing maintaining our roots to these areas, our land. And in my case, as a Tohono Autumn living in Activism territory, which is the Phoenix area along with the Peeposh, it's starting really where you're at. And I guess I have a unique take or vision or view on like how these conversations are, because of the fact that I live in Phoenix, so I'm a guest in my fellow Acoma area compared to living where I'm originally from, Cells. But in that, it shaped my perspective and view about the struggle, because a lot of how I'm here now at the stage didn't come from a book, it didn't come from a class, which not to say that's bad, but it came from being woken up at checkpoints, as a teenager, going back home to the reservation just to help my family, being woken up and seeing my grandpa, arguing with Border Patrol agents when they're asking him, "Are you American or Mexican officer?" He's like, "No, I'm not. I don't know what that means to be." I'm like, "Well, I'm off." So to hear those things growing up, it's definitely shaped my view on what we're all here for today, regarding migration, regarding border militarization, regarding these attacks from the state. So that being said, along with hearing Public Enemy, hearing WA, hearing this hip hop culture, being influenced around that has definitely given me an opportunity to share, living in both worlds, living in the modern world and living in the Optim world, these things, because our voice is marginalized. It's made invisible, and myself, I have that privilege to be in this space, to be able to rap and share these words, but at the same time knowing that it all starts from where I'm from on the res, and being part of community efforts. Currently, I'm part of a group called Thorn, which stands for Tohono O'odham Rights Network, and Hamishkam meaning all of us, it's together doing these things. And it's a loose collective, but we've been part of various projects regarding Know Your Rights. We all contribute to that, regarding those sessions on the community, having outreach, and also just be able to share this information, what's going on in our territory, because, colonization is still ongoing. In my lifetime, right now I'm about to be 29, coming up in December, I've seen the border transform from a chicken wire fence now to vehicle barriers. And, what's on deck from these people, these monsters, is to build an all-out Berlin Wall. And the reason I say Berlin Wall is because I initially heard that from my grandpa, because back in the 50s he was stationed out there, and he's like, yeah, growing up, seeing it now, they're building an Optim Wall, an Optim Berlin Wall. So a lot of that has shaped our, not just myself, but my generation of Tohono O'odham to be maybe the last generation to know what it looks like not to have Border Patrol in our area, to have drones in the air, to have all these attacks that are happening, because unfortunately the generation after me, the younger ones or the teenagers now, they're so used to it, but at the same time they also know it's not right. So a lot of the work that you with Thorn, one of the collectives I'm part of, is to share that, this history, because we're still living in a state of trauma right now. And that's because of colonization. And colonization, is one, impacting our diets. That's why there's a huge push for, renewing our traditional foods, but it's also knowing just that we have the right to travel freely. Because with this border, the so-called border, our way of life is attacked, where we can't even, or we can ultimately, but it's just they harass us to travel freely for ceremony, to do runs, to do awesome things, which to me is not activism or a political statement, it's just being who we are. So a lot of, my background comes from that, because to be real, I don't really associate with acronyms or organizations or non-profit funding in any way. It's just it really comes down to community. And a lot of what happens on the reservation is a community effort. It's just us coming together either for that ceremony, coming together for those runs that we do, prayer and so forth, or at times, doing demonstrations outside of the Tohono O'odham Nation tribal headquarters to demand for Border Patrol accountability, which was the case last fall. So there's various things that are happening on the res, but I guess part of the reason why I'm here tonight is to let y'all know is that we're still here, and we are on occupied Tohono O'odham land right now, Jebud, actually in the area of Walk, which is the reservation of Santa Vera down the road. And when we have these discussions, it's at times challenging, because a lot of times there's not a settler consciousness to know where we're at and to start from these occupied territories, because indigenous people have say in this conversation. And unfortunately, at times when it comes down to national debates, mainstream politics, as we know, indigenous people are pushed out of that. That's been happening since first contact. So all I like to share, regarding efforts that are happening on the res internally, is that on the outside to know that we're still here. And people can organize however, but it's just to have that consciousness to realize that, you know, we need to recognize where we're at and make sure we're not pushing for policies that are going to throw other communities under the bus. So it's just, you know, I want to make that clear because, you know, as all of them, it's just very hard at times to be able to be in these spaces, but at the same time, for hip hop, for I guess rap, I would say it's been able to give me that platform to share, along with not just the border struggle, because living in the Phoenix area with my Activism relatives, and keep in mind Activism river people, Tohono desert people, and by Rocky Point Hiachidothm sand people, we're all one big nation. It's just that we've had our certain areas, just like most nations across this continent have, but Otham territory spanned from the Phoenix area down here, down to Rocky Point, down to Hermosillo. And I've, you know, been down that way, met many Otham, which is always very powerful and, you know, puts things in perspective when they know Spanish, we know English, but then our language is the only middle ground. So it just shows that these borders are not going to stop who we are. It's just that we can't forget those roots, and that's what they want with these borders. It's more than just a physical barrier. It's more than desecration of our territories and sacred sites. It's also mental, you know, because as they say, you know, in circles I've been around with elders, is that once you give into that, you lose it, you can't get it back. So that's why it's crucial for us to exercise our right through ceremony, through runs, things that we do. Granted, we might, you know, at times be harassed by Border Patrol when we're crossing over doing our annual Unity Run, which is, well, this March will be the 28th year. And I mean, part of that for the past 8, just to try to scare us not to go over and say we need passports and all this, you know, crap they have nowadays. But we're like, hey, our ID's in our blood. You know, it's a ceremony. So things like that, you know, we definitely try to keep going. But overall, you know, back to what I was saying with the Phoenix area, some of the zines I had back there regarding the Loop 202 struggle, which is a proposed $2.8 billion 8-lane freeway that will desecrate Moradolak, which is in Otham, Greasy Mountain, which is the settler name is South Mountain, which is on the western edge, which from there will be, where they have the current line, the track for everything will blow up South Mountain, which is a sacred site to us. But just to sum up why I'm mentioning it here in this border migration discussion is because it's actually part of NAFTA. It's part of the One Sun Corridor, which is a Phoenix or Arizona regional transportation concept to have nonstop development from Prescott, Phoenix, to here to Nogales. So that's madness in itself to have a nonstop city. But then again, you look at Riverside of LA or any other major city, you know, this is what they do. But here in Arizona, has not happened and it won't happen. But beyond that, it's also part of the Canamex corridor, which is a bigger international NAFTA superhighway from Edmonton, Canada, all the way through the United Snakes to Mexico to Puerto Guaymas. So, I mean, once you start putting things in perspective regarding our struggles, you see, you know, how this is not just 78 miles of unauthorized nation. It's not just deportation. It's all these policies that are affecting us. And of course, as they do divide and conquer, you know, they want Native people to be able to have those conversations with other indigenous people who are now living in these territories. So a lot of the work that, at least through my hip hop project, Shining Soul, which my other group mate, somewhere in the back, I don't know where he's at, Frank Colibrí, aka the Bronx Candidate, you know, we share these issues for our music and be able to create that space either in this setting or, you know, hip hop shows, you know, be able to hold space in that regard to let people know, one, if you want to keep it real, we'll start where you're at. And, you know, that means solidarity is a pushback against settler colonialism, in my opinion, and have an anti-colonial response. But for hip hop, we're able to say the shit sometimes you can't say, and it's always fun. And you know, out of that, we've been able to be on Democracy Now! And various other, you know, media outlets. But when it comes down to it, ultimately, it is a tool to share. And for sure, you know, hustling and grinding on the hip hop game, but you know, being here in this type of space, we're also in our communities doing community events with Native youth. Like we definitely hit all aspects of, you know, what needs to, the outreach that needs to be done. So this is a little brief, you know, intro, I guess you would say. But sum up some of the work. There's some zines in the back. They're a little outdated, but I mean, just the 101s are there. But since Raúl's getting the poetry going on, I'll finish the last one like this. In my state, I meditate to correlate that border walls and interstates facilitate capital that liquidates and urinates upon the sacred that desecrates and suffocates. Similar to what freeways oscillate, it contaminates, separates, deflates our cost of living and the lands that we populate. Market rates regulate and punctuate 522 years of hate, still resonate, intoxicate, elevate. Let me demonstrate. Ain't where you from, it's where you at. So where you at? This explains why I relay this communique. We're on Tohono off the land, we never went away. We're here to stay, convey, above the fray. Revolution every day, our record to play.
Thank you, Alex. And our next speaker is Kathryn Rodriguez.
I don't do spoken word much. I wish I did. My name is Kat Rodriguez. First I wanted to ask, how many people here are from Arizona or Tucson? And how many of you are not Arizona folks? Okay, good. I wanted to ask that because I didn't want to talk down. I didn't know how much knowledge to assume about the border. I work with the Colibrí Center for Human Rights, which is an organization that is based, that was created because of the increasing crisis, human rights crisis of deaths on the border, and also of missing individuals. So our organization does missing persons reports on migrants who disappeared or were believed to have disappeared while attempting to cross the U.S.-Mexico border. And then we also have a relationship with the medical examiner's office, and so our reports we then compare against unidentified human remains in the Pima County Medical Examiner to see if they match in an attempt to identify or facilitate the identification through the medical examiner's office. We're working on a database that will be, hopefully it someday would be actually border-wide, where all of the reports go and where all of the information about recovered remains would go. I think the deaths is something that, you turn on the news right now and you're always hearing about immigration, especially right now, right? Immigration reform and everybody's on hold to see what Obama's gonna do, but how many of you have heard anything, any elected official, any politician talk about the deaths? Not a word, right? Not a word about the deaths. They are the most silent of the silenced. And I think that it's important what we do in the sense of the dignity, the very basic dignity of somebody having their name associated with their remains, of somebody knowing what happened to their loved one, of that family being able to bury them, cremate them, have some sort of ceremony to understand how that person's life ended. Doesn't mean it necessarily heals, because I think that those are the kinds of wounds that never do heal. But our focus is directly supporting the families who are really the casualties. I mean, when people die, they're gone, but the rippling effects of the pain and the suffering continues in their families, in relatives who are still looking for relatives 10 years later, 12 years later, even longer. What I would like to convey to those of you who are not from the border is that this crisis, and we're not being dramatic by saying that this is a human rights crisis. I mean, we're talking about more than 6,000 human beings, 6,000 humans who have lost their lives on the U.S.-Mexico border. At Colibrí, we have over 2,000 missing person reports. I mean, you're talking about people who've been disappeared. There's no other way to say it, right? When you don't know who they are or where they are. But this is a manufactured situation. This is not something that happened by mistake. It's not something that's like, oh, geez, this is a terrible consequence. No, this was intentional. By militarizing the border, and what that means is sealing down traditional crossing points where people were crossing, and intentionally funneling migration into certain areas, that area being Arizona. It is created, and this was intentional for lots of reasons. One of them is that Arizona is a whole lot of, land. 85% of the border is wildlife refuges, national parks, indigenous land. It's not heavily populated, and a lot of it is controlled directly by the government. So it's a lot easier to put some of these things into place. And one of the very specific places that have been able to resist the Tohono Nation is one that, the size of the state of Connecticut, its land is cut by the border. And because they have so far, they do have vehicle barriers, but they have resisted walls, and I would like to think that they will forevermore. But that doesn't mean, what it also has meant is traffic has been funneled specifically onto the Tohono Nation, where I think the last estimate I saw was like 52% of remains recovered were actually recovered on the Tohono Nation. And many of those migrants are indigenous people. They're people who come from indigenous agriculturally based communities in their home countries. I just wanted to read some of these numbers from this past year. Our fiscal year just ended. There were 121 remains that were recovered. Fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. 36 of them were male, 2 of them were female, 81 of them were of unknown gender. And what that means is that not enough of their remains were recovered to even know, without a forensic and anthropological exam, whether they're a male or a female, without DNA in some cases. There was 1 minor. 109 of those 121 were initially unidentified. And I say initially because at this point some of them might have been identified. But you're talking about 90%. 90% there. Usually that number will drop down over a little bit of time as people are ID'd, but it usually hovers around 60 to 70% of people that are unidentified. And 90 of them, or 74%, were skeletal remains. And what that says is that people are being pushed into the more and more isolated areas where it's less likely that someone will find them. It's less likely that they could flag someone down for help. And by the time that they are found, between the elements and the animals, there isn't much left. And so skeletal remains are all that you have to give back to a family member, to give back to, children of, this is your mother, this is a horrible tragedy. I think it's interesting that you brought up the Berlin Wall. I was in Germany this summer. I was in Berlin, and I went to the Berlin Wall. And it's this. Have any of you been to the Berlin Wall? It's this massive outdoor museum, and you walk it. You walk the museum, and they have whole sections of it that show you how it used to be. They left a whole chunk intact that show the towers, and then the double and triple fencing set up in the whole no man's land where people from the tower would shoot at anyone crossing. And there was this whole monument with photos of all the people who had died that was there. And there was their stories, and then there were these little like metal landmarks on the ground that kind of showed you like where tunnels were. They also showed you where certain people died. It was this amazing. I was just completely floored. If any of you are my Facebook friends, you saw a huge album on Facebook. I couldn't believe it. Took pictures of everything. And the most powerful thing to me is that from 1961 to 1989, 136 people died on the Berlin Wall. That is about, this last year, 121. We don't have monuments. We don't honor. We don't recognize. I was so moved by how in Germany it's just ingrained in people to understand that this is wrong, that the wall is wrong, the wall killed and divided. And it showed stories of families who were split up and who couldn't go to weddings, and mothers looking down at their daughter who'd gotten married, who's looking at her mother over the wall. You don't hear those stories about migrants. You don't hear those stories about people who've been disappeared on our border here. And I think that that's so telling of the fact that the root of a lot of this is racism. Nobody likes to say it, but there's no other name for it. There's so many levels of it that are really, really painful. But I was sitting there thinking, could you imagine if we were to do an outdoor museum someday on the wall showing all of this? You would have thousands of little metal markers. You would have thousands of pictures. You would have thousands and thousands and thousands of photos of people and stories. And you could push buttons and hear this audio stories. It was so amazing. And all I could think was, I have no faith that we would do that here. And that's really, really sad to say about one's country, but it's true. I think also recognizing the trauma that we are basically doing on a continual basis to families who live on the border, and not just people who are crossing or who are related, but those of us who live in border communities, we're affected as well. You know, when anyone in our community suffers, we all suffer. And I think we don't necessarily think it that way, but we do. Those ripple effects reach us too. We're all in the same water, right? And eventually those ripples will hit us. And I think it's making a lot of our communities sick. And a lot of us are disillusioned and very, it's depressing. I can honestly say every time I see these new discussions about immigration reform and all these things, and I sit there waiting and knowing it'll never come, that they acknowledge the deaths on the border, that they acknowledge the crisis that's happening, and that they just say one word about how what we're doing is wrong, rather than how many more millions of dollars are going to be added to ramp up and amplify what they're doing. And nobody's asking questions about who, you know, where's this money, who's getting this money, what are the contracts, who are the people behind the contracts, you know, what are the human rights records, what's the actual impact been on communities on the border all of these years. Those questions are not asked. And there's this disconnect. There's this big disconnect, and I think that there's also an issue of ownership, because we don't own it. The U.S. doesn't own a lot of the things that we do. We don't own what our drones do. We don't own what our walls do. We don't own what criminalization does. We don't own what detention centers do and prisons do. And all of the things that we do to devastate. And then we wonder why things are such a mess and people are so disenfranchised. And I feel like I'm really depressing right now. I do have hope. I'm really proud to be working in a place that at least is putting the families, is doing anything we can to help families to find their loved ones, to identify them. It's a huge, huge task, but I think it's really important to be witnesses to what's happening, to have those stories out there, to be talking to people about it, to also have a space where family members are able to talk about it. There's a lot of movement, like in Mexico, there's movements of mothers of disappeared children who have band together and created different groups of madres and comadres, and it's pretty amazing. And I'd like to think at some point we could be a support system for that, for those. There are a lot of people living in the U.S. So I just want to, I feel like I wish I could end on this really profound note rather than sounding like I got up here and said a lot of depressing things. But the thing that does give me hope is that so many of you are here. I'm always really moved by people who come to Arizona to learn and to see and to be here, because there's something about seeing the border and breathing the air and understanding how beautiful it is, rather than getting your information from, like, you know, Anderson Cooper and his bulletproof vest, like ducking behind cars. If any of you saw that coverage when he was covering a lot of the violence on the border, we have a really beautiful border. We have a really beautiful community, and I think that this is the time that we have to call out to allies. So I'd like to invite all of you who are not from here to talk about these things when you go home, to challenge them when you go home, to bring them up with your, like, racist uncle or, like, crazy brother who listens to, like, Rush Limbaugh, because we all have those relatives that are, you know, I'm Tohono, I'm from Texas. My family does not have a history of migration. Our family is from the same land since before the Republic of Texas and the U.S. and Mexico existed. We have indigenous roots in our land. We go back, you know, before we've been stripped of our language and our identity in many ways. Texas was very efficient in that way in some respects. So I constantly get questions about, like, where are your people from? And it's such a very strange, because I'm like, well, we were here, y'all came. I just say y'all. So I just want to invite all of you, because this is a very special, sacred place to be on the border, and to recognize not just what's going on, but what happened before here, and recognize we are on indigenous land, and the people who continue to die crossing the border, many of them are indigenous people. And it's very tragic to me to think about those 52%, many of them who die within the visual of Colibrí, you know, the most sacred place for the Tohono. And I feel like that's like another level of dehumanization. So I think it's time that we rehumanize the issue of migration, the issue of deaths, the issue of suffering, and challenge that because it's missing, tragically missing from every conversation that is happening right now on the border and on immigration and on migration in general. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Our last speaker is Vikter Medina.
Hello everybody, my name is Vikter Medina. I am born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. The past 32 years of my life I've actually seen the shift, Phoenix communities being wiped out, neighborhoods being gentrified, literally just flipped upside down. And so that's a little bit of my background. Well, I'm about to give you more of my background. It really comes in, I guess, more of a story. I'm not used to, spaces like these and speak in front of everybody, so this is the best way that I can sort of, speak my my soul. You might hear a little crackle in my voice because I'm real nervous. So really, the story starts maybe about 30 years ago. A young man in the hood whose family has never moved out of the 85009 zip code of Phoenix, Arizona. A community of blacks, Mexicans, literally it was a hood. Police violence, it was just as normal. Gangs, my brothers, it was normal. That's just, how life was. Taking his mother's hand everywhere he walked and went with her. She was a hardworking person. 2 parents working in, wood cutting factories, and really, following her around and seeing her, actually taking her kindness and her spirit to all people around her. Working in factories, she's helped countless people actually gain access to paperwork and getting their citizenship. A father who's a very hard worker, taking cue from him and always working hard for everything that he's ever done in his life. There on the couch late nights, while friends come over, helping translate paperwork and always being there by her side. Growing up with this fire, this little pilot inside of him, it wasn't until I guess 2010, early parts of 2010, it was through happenstance that I was in the space of organizing with direct communities. Once the economy tanked, so did my job. And almost in this point, this turning point where all directions were possible, it was through all this personal history that I became part of, organizing spaces with the Puente inside the Nahuacali, with Jotería. It was in this space that I actually found, what felt right, and moving, and actually everything that I've ever, experienced came at this moment. And so in this very important time, there was, 287G, there was secure communities, SB 1070, the shit hit the fan and the community was reacting. And in these, spaces, what was really interesting is that, being a young gay man, putting, all identities together, there was never a concentration of queer people coming together to unpack the oppression around us and the things that were directly, affecting us, our friends, our family, everyone around us, seeing, neighborhoods in Mesa, completely disappear because people were fleeing. And so the birth of Third Space happened. Third Space, my little notes right here on my little phone. Third Space, I definitely want to share all this, is a fabulous collective of queer folks of color and allies working on social justice issues in Phoenix. We've been a queer voice, always dedicated to strategically making the invisible visible through grassroots organizing, leadership development, community empowerment, and education. as far as I've ever known, I've never come across, you know, spaces like this that were very moving in our community, that queer people actually came together to talk about the world and the oppression that was actually happening around us. I mean, there was these moments when, you know, Brewer, she signed SB 1070, and the community was shattered. It was so shattered. And then coming together in more of a healing process, you know, to talk about these things, and it still ripples in our communities now. Right now, you know, there's groups like, you know, Quip that are out there doing, you know, actually queer discussion and queer organizing spaces. And this is something that, you know, we actually came together so that I can share with you folks today. The members of Third Space, who I also bring in this room as well too. As the assault on working people, people of color, queer people, women and migrant people have continued, many of us under attack internalize these messages of hatred and prejudice and become divided from each other. The current state of racism and hate in the U.S. Encourages anti-migrant policies that disproportionately target already marginalized communities and affect all of us. In order to build a powerful, vibrant social movement that is strong enough to turn the tide and create the world where we can all live and love with human dignity. We must wage our struggle widely and create a long-term vision and address all of our needs of humanity. The demands of our struggle must ensure healthcare, economic, stability, self-determination, human dignity, and the recognition from us all. Regardless of our national identity, skin color, or our sexual orientation, we are gay, we are Latino, Jotas, Jotos, migrants, workers, queer, anti-racist white people, students, professors, gender non-variant people, organizers, professors, questioning folks, people of color, straight allies, visionaries, and learners, and we come together in a community space as part of healing. And where we're at right now is we are currently organizing a national gathering of sorts of queer, Latino, Latina, trans folks within the States, internationally, and globally to come together to envision a future ahead of us, to take in consideration our past, who we are, and how we're going to move forward as a global community of, all that are assembled in one space in Phoenix, Arizona by next year. Further tightening the fabric of who we all are and all of our interconnectedness and how we lie in this world and just everything around us. And so it's really short, my little presentation here. I'm really not that really prepared, but thank you everybody for coming today. It was very beautiful seeing everybody, and I'm very happy to see my lovely niece in this audience. I really love it. So thank you so much.
So thank you all so much. We have a little bit of time for questions, and I think is the other mic, the audience mic, is that somewhere? You take one of those and pass that. Yeah. So maybe we'll do. So Hannah, do you want to run the audience mic?
Oh yeah, sorry. Getting really into the tweeting.
Hannah's over there getting into the Twitter. So we'll have an opportunity to give you a chance to ask questions, and then we'll kind of give them a chance to close out. So if you just raise your hand, and then we'll get you the mic to you. If you just want to state your name and whatever you have to say, that'd be great. Don't all jump in.
I can start. So one of the things I was really excited about was the confluence of activism and art. I'm wondering if you can talk about how you conceptualize the relationship between those two things, how they inform each other, because it seemed very salient across many of the panelists tonight.
Can you be sure to speak into the microphones too when you pass it around? So.
Raúl appointed me. As far as my perspective, it's hand in hand. Native people in general, it's storytelling. In this case, it's hip hop. So, myself, I see this as an extension of sharing my story along with my groupmate's story for hip hop. And hip hop, beyond its contradictions, as we know, hip hop culture, it is rebel music. It is a platform, and spoken word, anything along those lines is always going to be a vessel to share. And as a person of color, as an indigenous person, as a Tohono, we have a lot to share. Because a lot of what was happening during this time period, past 4, 5, 8 years, my whole life, to see the militarization, it's definitely been an outlet to help me, have that balance. And I always, my partner, she always sees this for me. It's like it's a balance, the activism, and then sometimes shit doesn't work out the way it works out, and then I have music. And maybe music stuff doesn't pop off the way I envision it. So it's always been a way to go back and forth, but ultimately it's definitely been a way to share, in a way where it's not dogmatic. It's not some preacher in the corner pointing fingers. And it can be that, but I feel that when you get someone for art or music, it's hitting your soul, it's hitting your heart, and you have an open mind compared to this getting mad. Which I'm fine with getting mad, but let's be creative with it. So.
For me, it's art, the art form, or the poetry, or art in whatever form for myself. It's a medium for me to be able to communicate what's in my heart and my soul, and my political analysis, and using a bit of creativity, also being able to have a space or a medium where I can share or say things in ways that I wouldn't be able to in a normal conversation or in a regular speech. I feel like it allows for, it's a sense of healing when I write, and when I am able to express and communicate what I am envisioning, or what I am going through, or my political visions. It allows for a certain level of insurgency, I don't know if that's the correct word, or militancy, that I wouldn't normally be able or feel like I could. So it allows for this space where I could be, in a sense, not someone else, but just be able to be more concise in a political vision, and what is it that I am feeling, what am I seeing, and what change I want to see in the world. So that's what it allows for myself in terms of poetry.
As far as how arts and activism really, how they weave with each other, it was, it really started with, doing a lot of culture work in the community, opening up spaces, creating queer culturas, where we come together and actually, visibly look at each other in all of our art forms, whether it's through painting, spoken poetry, performances. It was in these spaces that, that self-determination was, that's what it came out of, and I guess sort of expressing our culture in spaces that were very, very important outside of, the gay clubs or the bars. That was only spaces that we actually even had to come together, and actually, of community, and also, within these spaces, the things, politics were always spoken about, and they're always addressed in performances, and in our cries for help to ourselves. So arts and activism really go hand in hand with each other. In my coming of two as a community organizer and so forth in culture.
Kat's of course an artist too, but she's just not gonna talk about it.
Yeah, in my former life.
Hi, so I want to ask the question, is there anything being done about the women who are disappearing on the Ciudad Juarez border in the desert? Is there any like organization, or because it's very covered up by the media, and because people don't want to admit what's going on there. And I have many friends my good friend Natalia, she was doing something with some of her friends against the feminicides again on the border of Ciudad Juarez and in Mexico. So I was just wondering if there's anything that's being done about the women's issue in the desert.
This is in Juarez, El Paso. There are a lot of active groups that have been created out of the family members of the women on the Mexico side. There's most of the work, at least my experience, and maybe you have other, but a lot of the work, and I feel it's the correct way, is that we support those efforts, because it is those families should be taking the lead on it. And there's a couple different groups, family groups, that have come together and created different things, done different demands. They've done caravanas where they've gone throughout Mexico, but also in the U.S. and done like speaking tours. And I feel like as somebody on the U.S. side, one of the ways to support is maybe to invite them to speak, not speak for them, but allow them, create a space where they can come and actually tell those stories, and have their voices, have it be their own voices that are talking about those stories and talking about what's going on and saying what they need. Because I think that it often happens that we decide what's best, and that can be problematic. So I think following the lead. So there's a couple different, I can't think of any, if you give me your email, I could send you a couple links to some, but I personally really encourage supporting the groups that are led by actual family members of the disappeared, rather than organizations that maybe not have a different agenda where that ties in, and maybe they're doing good work, but I just feel it's so important that the family members themselves speak in their own voice, and that we use our privilege to create space for those voices to be heard.
Can I ask something else? Have you guys ever tried to impeach NAFTA? Because NAFTA, the pretty sure you're there, the reason behind the maquiladora factories, which are just a bunch of outsourcing, and it doesn't do any good for the economy, and it doesn't do any good for the women in general. So I was just wondering if you could impeach NAFTA or rebel against the whole organization, because they're the ones who are responsible for all this on the border.
I'll start, but I know the others. I think that's an excellent idea. I don't think it's completely correct to say it's been bad for everybody, because there's a certain number of people that have become extremely disgustingly rich, wealthy off of that, and it's benefited, and that wealth is also used to ensure that those power structures stay in place. So we have done the utmost to ensure that when your tomato arrives from Mexico, it's not bruised and it's protected, and there's no damage done to it. But we don't really give a shit what happens to a woman or a man who's crossing the border. We find that really disgustingly ironic. But I think that's a call that a lot of people make, is that if we want to trace the root of a lot of this, it comes from neoliberal policies, from free trade agreements, which have opened the borders completely wide for commerce and sealed them shut for human migration. But I don't know of any concerted efforts that have said, repeal it. We all are begging for people to acknowledge that that's the root cause of a lot of it, and not just NAFTA, but CAFTA and AFTA and Plan Puebla Panama. There's a whole, so there's a whole cascading. It's all of it, and they seem to have gained a stronger foothold with the success of each. So I don't know if any of you have heard.
Yeah. This is the first time I heard someone mention that. It's awesome in the audience, because in past engagements, people step to me and go, "Well, what do you want?" I'm like, "Well, one, indigenous liberation, Tohono liberation." But in terms of you want some rallying call for a political option, I'm like, "Well, call your local whoever and demand the end of NAFTA." That's the problem. And it's good that more and more folk are, and I mean, I think we all know that it's ultimately the problem, but it's just the layers of that. And I was mentioning that earlier regarding the Canamex corridor, because after that, you know, with this effort around that freeway, just going to these public meetings from Maricopa County, as all the city of, you know, the Maricopa County area deciding transportation plans, and then you start hearing all this international trade. Like, this is why Phoenix is an inland port. This is why Tucson's an inland port. I mean, their whole strategy is to bypass Long Beach to go to the Port of Guaymas, set up sweatshops essentially there, pretty much what they already do in other parts of Mexico and other, you know, anywhere south of the so-called border, and just have cheaper labor. And that's pretty much the plan that Arizona has to make Arizona a player instead of a bypass state, which is what I'm hearing in these transportation meetings, that they want to have a corridor that makes the trade north to south compared to LA across the country. So in that, though, it's the kind of like more, what does that look like, instead of like these vague concepts, it's like to really understand what does that look like locally. I mean, I have a friend, a website y'all can all check out, stopcanamex.blogspot. One of my good friends, Stacy, is a facilitator of that, but it's really Phoenix focused, but it does come to Tucson regarding the Interstate 11, which is another part of the Canamex corridor. So when you start to look at that, you start to see, well, why are these certain areas of the train yards foreign trade zones, which essentially means it's outside the U.S. economy. So it gets into these really like theory-based, but also like it's happening outside your door conversations, because what I mentioned regarding, you know, migration is like who's going to be exploited to be in these areas. It's people that are already being exploited here, along with whose land's going to be stolen off the land. So like all these struggles connect through NAFTA, but in particular, the Canamex corridor and the Sun corridor is the local, regional to international context of it, which the website breaks it down. It's hardcore. I mean, it's definitely footnotes and all, but it's definitely things that are like I never thought I would be sharing regarding my efforts to stop the freeway, along with my friends and community members along with that. So.
I think this is a conversation about global capitalism and abolishing it, and neoliberal economic structures and overthrowing those. And so, not just that, but also white supremacy, imperialism, patriarchy, citizenism, and all these isms. I don't know if this is too ambitious or it's too much to ask for or too much to fight for, but I let's think that, you know, the work that we do on a day-to-day has an impact, you know, towards that vision. And I think it's about talking about what our analysis is and building a collective analysis that includes and is anti-systems of oppression, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, that will inform our strategies and our tactics. And so I think that in the context of migrant justice or LGBTQ rights movements, that these are analyses and visions that we still need to strengthen and talk about more deeply. So thank you for your question.
So there's time for one more.
Hi. Okay, so, well, not even, I was going to say more specifically for those of you who have worked more specifically in Tucson, but it doesn't really matter. Well, I'm not from Tucson, I'm not from the United States either. And I was thinking quite a bit about how it is very interesting that in Tucson, I mean, part of the reason why there's a lot of people who come is what you said, Pat. Like, there's a lot of people who are attracted to this movement, right? Which doesn't necessarily have to be positive or negative, right? Because you have, like, you know, good and bad, as usual, and in between. And something that I have been noticing a lot is that there's a lot of divide between groups that are mostly white and groups that are not. And there's like a lot of, in terms of like grassroots organization and you know, all that, nonprofits. Especially because Tucson is the city that has, you know, the most nonprofits per capita in the entire United States. That's a lot. And so I guess my question will be about how you see those dynamics being played on the grassroots organizing that you guys do. And yeah, mostly that.
Well, I have to say, drama and movement is not isolated to Tucson. I did work for the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in LA for about 6 weeks for Taco Bell action, and I was shocked. I hadn't really gotten into as much drama in Tucson. It exists. I think that there's a couple levels of it. I mean, I've been here doing border work for about 15 years. I moved here in 2000, and I can honestly say that myself 15 years ago was probably more prone to drama. So it has to do, I think, with time and maturity, and we get tired as we get older. We just, don't have much energy for drama. But I think it's a constant struggle to recognize that there's a lot of stuff we need to do. There's a lot of work to be done, and there really is there is enough space for everyone to do it. I think where it gets tricky is when people want to own things, and you can't own social justice. You can't own human rights. It belongs to everybody who is a human being, and even people who are shitty human beings are human beings, and we all own it, right? So I feel like there's always hope for, I argue with my dad's he's a right-wing Republican. It's my dad. So in my head, I always have these conversations of how would I convince my dad? Because I feel like that would be I could have a shot, if I could just figure that out. But it really is about space. It's about respect, and it's about recognizing there is enough space for everybody, but also recognizing you don't get to be everywhere. I work with the Alianza Indígena Sin Fronteras. Never have I said, man, it's hard to be an Indigenous woman. I do have Indigenous roots, but I don't feel that I'm connected enough to them to be able to speak for people. I can speak about what I know as an ally and as a privileged person from those places, and I think that it's an easier. I think people of color get there easier than white people. Not to talk bad about white people, but I think sometimes that getting there is harder because people feel like if you're helping that you should just be accepted, and that there's not a process, and that the trust is not natural necessarily to all of us because of our history of being hurt or wounded or having damage done by people from the outside, and not white and non-white people from the outside coming in. So I think that happens with every place. I don't think Tucson is the only place that has it. It's very sad because there really is enough work to do, and if that energy could be channeled into doing positive things, we could do a lot more. But I also think when I see people, especially when I see really angry brown women, I'm like, man, that was me. I was so pissed off, and everything would just and I can't judge because I was there, and now I'm less that way. I think I still get a bitch about stuff, as is my right. But I think it's a process, and I think it's also important to recognize that people are in those places. If I look at some of the stuff that youth are doing, and I'm like, man, I wish I was doing half that stuff when I was that age, because the youth is amazing. But they also need space to make their journeys in their different places and recognize that we have a lot to learn from the youth as much as they have to learn from us. And just it's a tough place to be not an elder and not a youth. Nobody really, we're not cool enough to be looked up to, but we still get smacked for not being respectful enough. It's a balance. But so I think it's a balance, and I think that we need to forgive ourselves a little, but I do think that everybody should be actively working on the de-dramatization of movement work.
Yeah, so in grassroots organizing and being in the same spaces, people of color and white people, time after time it has been proven to be difficult, almost like, being in a dream and you wanting to run faster but you're just walking, or wanting to drive faster but you're just going so slow, trying to move ahead with, a vision of organizing and, ensuring that, we try to do the best, make peace in our own communities. time and time again, but always welcoming with our allies that come into our folds and recognizing them as well too in the work that they do and how we all collectively work with each other. So in my experience, it has been difficult, but it hasn't been something that was lost. Working hand in hand with everybody around us.
I guess the way I look at it, it's not oppression Olympics. Granted, it feels that way at times, but as an indigenous person, I would like to know in terms of like what non-people of color or native folk, white people, Milligan, as we say in the Tohono language. There's definitely allies, white allies, but a lot of my experience, and there's room for your folk where they're at, depending on their comfort level and so forth, but at certain times we need to, I would wish white folk or any ally would weaponize that privilege, because being on occupied territories and the blatant attacks, there's just a lot going on. And I think from how I understand it, from elders and just other native, the same conversation, pretty much the question that was asked is that, there's a responsibility, I feel, if you're a settler, and I think we all know that as white settlers, for sure, there's a lot of things that need to be done. Example, how about, go after these politicians who want this freeway, and, we need more white-on-white engagement, just say, an abolitionist position, where it's like, we don't want this, and they have more privilege than myself or anybody on this panel, because if we get locked up, it's going to be more money, more bail, and so forth. But there's definitely that element, but I also feel as as my groupmate likes to say, an indigenous settler, there's also some responsibility to recognize the territories where you're at, and to be able to articulate those positions. And at least on my reservation, that's like any community, we're having those internal community discussions. But since I live on the outside, I also witness and hear these conversations. So it's just like I share with my people, it's like we need to get our shit together. But on the outside, I'm sharing it's just like, hey, just know where you're at. So we don't have oppression Olympics, which can be, it is called, you could equal colonization, because as native people, we're 0.00000 whatever of the population. So there's more non-natives, more of them, right? That maybe in the Tucson area or anywhere, occupied often territories, is good to say, well, what can I do there, along with all the other shit that's going on? Because myself, I'm not just solely involved with the Autumn struggle, but at the same time, it is Autumn liberation. And I feel within the colonial system, there's a lot of people who are more majority can have some say in that compared to myself or people from my community. But at the end of the day, that's, liberation is what I'm here for. Not to have a greener border wall, a nicer border wall, a nicer border patrol. For sure, that's the steps to get there. We know this, but that's not the end game. And one last thing I would like to throw out there is, and this is an internal conversation, is that we need to all power map, because there's so much shit that we all have common targets, because regarding movement, politics, and drama, ultimately that drama, they're not the target. The target is the Department of Homeland Security. The target is policymakers to enforce NAFTA and Canamex and World Trade, or WTO and IMF and so on. Sure, we got to figure it out. We got to have that consensus, but they're not. The drama within is it's bigger than that, so we got to look beyond the drama and move on. So, Bill.
I think racial segregation within organizations between white and brown is not necessarily a bad thing. I think that there has to be spaces for people directly impacted communities to be able to do their thing and build their leadership and build a strategy and organize, and also for white folks to organize themselves to also be anti-racist allies. Because when that isn't a consciousness within the white community, organizing becomes destructive and unhealthy. And I've been in efforts where there has been unhealthy efforts between white and brown communities, where there's paternalism and racism replicated, in an effort that tries to not be that. But at the same time, there's been other moments where I've worked with folks that are truly embodying solidarity as well, and allyship, particularly, these are examples, the Tucson Child Care Committee Collective provides child care for migrant families who identify that as a need are able to have meetings through Corazon de Tucson, or the Pronet Action Fund that does ongoing fundraising for bond support, so to fight for the release of people that are in detention. And also doing campaign work against the polymigra and racial profiling and SB 1070, we also come together in times and spaces where it makes sense. So I guess my whole philosophy about white-brown relations in organizing is juntos pero no revueltos, or juntos pero no siempre revueltos, together but not always mixed up.
Thank you. So that brings us to, I know, Kat, you wanted to mention the poster in the back of the room.
Oh, yeah, I brought a poster from Colibrí. One of, we have an artistic, his name is artistic director at Colibrí, and he created a poster called The Things They Left Behind, and it's sort of a representation of things that migrants, that have been found on migrants. And that's actually where Colibrí gets his name. Colibrí means hummingbird, and there was a migrant who was found, and he had a little dead hummingbird in his pocket. And there's this curiosity about what that story might be, and also the hummingbird is considered the messenger between the living and the dead, and so I think that's a really apt name for Colibrí. But so anyway, I just invite you to check out the poster, and you can email me if you wanted to order one, or you can go to the website, which is on the poster. I only have the one, but I just wanted to show it because I think it's a really beautiful visualization of what people actually take with them when they make that journey.
So, would you like to be taken out of tonight with a performance by Shining Soul? So, Shining Soul is going to take us out this evening. Just a reminder, if you'd like to do an interview with HQ Crystal for their documentary, please come and see them right after. And otherwise, hopefully I'll see many of you tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming, and I give you Shining Soul.
Hello, bienvenidos. My name is Franco Abre. Like my bandmate Alex was saying, we do hip hop, born and raised in so-called Phoenix, unceded Alcaraz territory. I've been there for about 3 generations. I come from lineage of migration, maternally from the state of Jalisco. Growing up, yeah. It's good about that. But so yeah, definitely, from the inner city, Barrio Campito, South Phoenix. So yeah, that's a little background about me. And I MC, and also I'm a beatsmith. We call the Beats for Shining Soul. I've been together about almost roughly 10 years. So yeah, it's a long ago. Yeah, tomorrow. Halloween anniversary, yeah. We had our first show like 10 years ago.
So if you like what we have CDs. Okay, we'll do a little fun. Alright, acapella, let's close it out.
I'll tell you where we're from. We from that home of the seaside boy, that house of the insurrection, where 1070 meets 187. No love for brown complexion, silence is acquiescence, where non-violence protects and serves the 1%.
We're from that land of the man in the maze, where criminalization, militarization got off fist raised.
Put 'em up.
Take action now, we revolutionary but indigenous. RBIs continue, West home runs over fences.
This means war, so I'll see you on the front line. Shots for the one time, it's in my bloodline. Always a rebel, never settle for the setup. Keep your head up and your heart open.
Beyond the spectacle, racist tentacles. You know why? It's bigger than Arpaio. Borders patrol for economic control. If you want to stop Joe, recognize
the fight is global, and you can bet that calling me wetback will get your head cracked. So I stay strapped with knowledge of self, full stuffed all black. I'll say it in all caps. That's the NOBORDERS. This struggle is not for the heartless. I reiterate, no borders. Gavachos got us living like sojourners. We landless, branded, scapegoated as scandalous. Fight back, self-defense is a human right. Despite what the liberals and the fascists say, the path has been laid, precinct to precinct, Chicano to the south side. Our communities have a militarized. Open your eyes, what we need is a militant response, a hood renaissance with a heavy dose of upheaval. But it starts with one conversation. Power concedes nothing without confrontation.
We from that ground zero, anti-hero, saying that shit that you can't say,
like smash borders, chinga la migra, middle finger to la lingua.
We from that desert borough, we keep it thorough, saying that shit that they can't say, like smash borders,
chinga la migra,
middle finger
to la lingua.
It's a no man's land, all quiet on the southern front, till the drones fly past, a reminder what is really up. What the fuck? It's war, time to spit my heart and guts in the face of law. Migra searching in my trunk at the checkpoint stuck. Fuck the police is what I pump. Same punks, Kenna monks, terrorizing like Ku Klux. Got my people in flux, I can only take so much. We up against the wall, my homeland's been pushed between a rock and a hard place where opposites chase. My red and brown face, e-verifying my race like the West Bank, and I'm the Palestinian for certain. Like the Iron Curtain, divided like East German. Speaking in first person, I am the native version of occupation, economic subversion. So I'm going insurgent, all out against borders. Entrenched like a reporter, upholding my people's orders, no borders.
From that ground zero,
anti-heroes,
saying that shit
that you can't say, like smash borders,
chinga la migra,
middle finger
to la lingua.
We're very friendly. We've always liked the assignments. 15 minutes usually. We also do all day tomorrow.
Again, that's 460 modern languages tomorrow. The interviews, and we just need to kind of
Hey guys, thanks so much.